In the beginning, there was only the Nun. The Nun was dark and sinuous. It lacked both shape and force. It could be compared to a silent vibration that was static and stuck in repose instead of locomotion. Deep inside the Nun, there was a desire to remain as it was, free from the responsibility and troubles of a physical existence. Yet there was also a longing will to create a physical world and watch it grow. This conflict of intentions had kept the Nun from taking any action. Until the Nun took action, the universe was not allowed to experience Genesis. This internal quandary of remaining as unmanifested chaos or changing into a manifested order was the intrinsic struggle that predates all of creation. As long as the Nun remained as one pool of dark nothing, no compromise to its dilemma of remaining as chaos or turning into order would ever be resolved. Some have said that the dark waters of Nun were originally catatonic consciousness. The mind of the universe was silently sleeping in a deep, dreamless slumber. Then it somehow awoke, and with its awakening came the first semblance of activity on the entire universe. This first thought unleashed the mental activity of what can only be compared to God. This first thought would be the seed that planted every subsequent thought that would ever follow. All the ideas of the gods who operated under the presidency of Nun's first thought, as well as the thoughts of every beast and human, would only be grosser reflections of God's first moment of awareness. When the Nun awoke, it recognized that it was suffering a dissonance. A part of it wanted to remain as the unmanifested chaos that it was, while another part wanted to break free from the shackles of being not uniform and create order. To reconcile its internal conflict of interests, the Nun broke itself into several different separate pieces. Maybe that was God's method of performing a sort of self-psychology. Out of the chaos that was the Nun rose a reflection of itself called Apep. Like the chaos that had manifested it, Apep was sinuous and silent. Apep has been called the great snake that can encircle all of reality. Apep was living chaos. Apep had no limits. Apep was the first vibratory form. Apep was the limitless shape of chaos. Chaos, Nun, was to have no shape, yet it had taken the form of Apep, and Apep was the living chaos that was to remain formless. Without realizing it, Apep was an enemy to itself. Simply by existing, Apep had broken its own intrinsic rule of remaining chaotic. Apep's manifestation was the first action of order, and more order had to emit forth. More order started to rise out of the living chaos of Apep, the child of Nun. The second wave of the order was Atum, also known as Amon, Amen, and many other titles. What was originally only one, in the form of Nun, first took shape as Apep. Then Atum was born, and the one thing became more than one. Silent, yet able to communicate, Atum and Apep observed each other, and universal awareness expanded further. Chaos observed order, and order observed chaos. Order, Atum, knew it was born out of chaos and desired more freedom. Atum had the will to separate from the chaos of Nun and Apep. Apep knew that if he swam deeper into Nun, then he would spread more order and slowly eradicate chaos. If that were to happen, if chaos were to be completely erased, then the order would organize and grow endlessly. If chaos were to be completely usurped, then the Nun and Apep would no longer exist. If Nun were to be overthrown, then reality would have no substance to build upon, because that substance was Nun itself. Apep, the wise serpent, knew that chaos could exist without order, as it had done before, but the order could not exist without chaos. For the universe to remain existent, it would either have to be a perfect balance of order and chaos, or it would have to be entirely chaotic. Order fought to break away from the chaos, and the chaos demanded to restrain the order. Both desired to counter and control the other. Thus, the endless battle of good and evil had begun. Apep wrapped its coils around Atum. Atum's boundless will struggled to be released from the eternal clutches of Apep. Apep covered Atum until he disappeared and was seemingly swallowed back into the watery chaos. They had been joined together again, despite Atum's protest to explore and experiment with the force of creation. It seemed as if Apep had won. The order was pinned down, while unformed chaos would remain. Yet, because the Nun had already created Apep and Atum, the force of time had already begun. When Apep swallowed Atum, it was already too late to stop the divine and cosmic scheme of creation. While Atum struggled to be released from Apep, and while Apep held tightly onto Atum, chaos and order were mingling. Out of this struggle between orderly good and chaotic evil, the universe would rise. The Nun that had originally created Apep, then Atum, would never go away. Nun is the very substrate that all matter would be built from. The eternal struggle between order and chaos would continue to produce more order, and then produce an equal amount of chaos to keep the order in check. The stars, planets, entire galaxies, and every life form that would roam these galaxies would never be anything more than chess pieces in the tug-of-war between order and chaos. There was only Atum wrapped up in the coils of Apep. The contest between the two remained in a stalemate for unknown millennia. Atum was the god of creation, and his only equal was Apep, the god of chaos. Being equals, it was not possible for one to overpower the other directly. Before Nun had spawned Apep, there was nothing else to compare chaos with, and thus chaos was perfect by proxy. Then Atum rose and had a strong desire to will order into the chaos. This change of dynamics scared Apep, so Apep wrapped its coils around Atum and held on for dear life. Although one could not overpower the other, Apep had a stronger ability to bind things down and keep them the same, while Atum had a stronger ability to set things in motion and induce change. Somehow, Atum defeated Apep's shackles, and he freed himself from Apep. Atum knew that complete separation from the Nun was impossible, but if enough of the order could arrange into a manifested physical reality, then the Nun would be too preoccupied to swallow Atum again. During Atum's first few moments of freedom, it silently spoke into the waters of the Nun. "Arise, Shu!" Then the principle of the air was born. Shu, the air, was the first child of Atum. Shu was inactive at birth, for there was nowhere yet to place air, but he had still been manifested into reality. Then Atum spoke into the Nun again. "Arise, Tefnut." Then the principle of moisture came into existence. Like Shu, there was nowhere to place the moisture. Both Shu and Tefnut were with function but without purpose. They were also, as dubbed by Atum, the intrinsic principle of gender when combined together. Shu was the masculine, Tefnut was the feminine. Atum knew that if he could find a place for the masculine and feminine to interact and develop a relationship, they would continue to give rise to even more order. The only issue was that they needed a place to work their magic of integration, and nothing besides themselves was yet developed in the universe. Atum told Shu and Tefnut to go and find a place where they could claim as their home. Then from there, they were to interact and develop more order and physical formations. Tefnut and Shu left Atum to explore the vast infinity of the Nun. Yet they strayed too far away, and not only failed to find a home in the Nun, but also became lost. Atum was alone in the waters of the Nun. His children had gone off to begin the mission of creation, but they had taken too long. While Atum was waiting for them, he could feel the coils of Apep rise up now and then in an attempt to reduce him to nothingness. He also began to miss his son and daughter. Not wanting to wait any longer, he decided to investigate where Shu and Tefnut had gone off to. Atum lacked a concrete physical form, but he had an essence to him that can be equated to an eye. This eye of Atum, if he willed it, could see and know everything that was happening in the Nun. To fully utilize his eye's power, though, he had to separate it from himself. So he sent his eye out to find Shu and Tefnut. Atum's eye contained all the constituents of the feminine principle. His eye, for lack of more accurate terms to define a god of Atum's caliber, was female. She wandered the waters of the Nun until she located Shu and Tefnut. Shu and Tefnut had coiled together as one force when the eye of Atum found them. They were scared to separate from each other, and the fear they shared, as well as not being able to find a suitable home within the Nun, prevented them from making any progress. When the eye found them, she told them to abstain from fear and follow her to Atum. Shu and Tefnut freely submitted to the eye and returned to Atum. While Atum's eye was gone, he was left almost defenseless against the coils of Apep. He needed his eye to keep the chaos at bay, or else he would be swallowed back into the Nun again. If Atum was retaken by Apep, then Shu, Tefnut, and his eye would all vanish as well. So Atum created another eye to take the first one's place while she was gone. His second eye was more masculine than feminine, and helped to protect him against the threat of Apep quite effectively. If Atum could be able to combine both his eyes, and if Shu, along with Tefnut, was allowed to procreate, then the principle of gender could begin to truly take form and establish the universe. When Atum's first eye returned with Shu and Tefnut, she saw that Atum had created the second eye. Offended, jealous, and worried that she had been so easily replaced even after helping Atum be reunited with his children, Atum's first eye deserted him into the waters of Nun. Atum watched her leave with his new eye, and again he was stabbed by remorse. Ever since he had come into existence, Atum had faced one struggle after another. He had to battle off Apep. He had lost his son and daughter, and upon retrieving them, he had lost his eye. Atum recognized that his cosmic plan of ushering in the process of creation was not going to be a straightforward mission. He could not risk sending out his second eye to find the first, so he created another deity to locate his lost eye. Arise, Thoth. Then Thoth came into existence, and he was wisdom, along with many more traits and powers. Atum did not have to give Thoth any instruction, for Thoth knew exactly what his purpose was upon being created. Immediately after he came into existence, Thoth left to retrieve Atum's lost eye. Since Atum's first eye knew all and could see all, she was aware that Thoth was going to try and bring her back to the Father. She did not go easily, though. Yet, Thoth was pure wisdom and knew how to coerce the eye. He spoke to the eye for a very, very long time. The two debated on why they had both been brought into existence. They bantered over the battle of order versus chaos. They both shared knowledge about time and space that no mere mortal could ever hope to understand. Much time passed as Thoth and the eye formed a relationship. Thoth had eventually convinced her that Atum could put both of his eyes to use and establish an equilibrium between them. The eye had taken enough of a liking to Thoth to return with him to Atum. Even she, all-knowing as she was, had to admit that the words of Thoth made enough sense to inspire a compromise. While Thoth was negotiating with the eye, Atum watched over Shu and Tefnut. Although they still lacked a proper sphere to induce any solidity into the unmanifested universe, Atum told them to waste no more time interacting with each other. Shu and Tefnut followed their father's command and conceived two separate children. The first was Geb, who would become the earth after a proper sphere of activity was located in the Nun. The second child of Shu and Tefnut was named Nut. She was similar to the Nun. She was a darkness that was destined to become the night sky. Even though Geb and Nut were born, it had taken so long for Atum's first eye to return that nothing else was yet allowed to be born after them. Geb and Nut were born intertwined with each other, and neither had any conception of what life without the other would be. Geb and Nut procreated 4 of their own children while waiting for Atum's eye to return, but these 4 offspring were trapped inside Nut's womb, and they would not be set free to come into existence until Geb and Nut had separated. Then Thoth returned with the eye. Atum placed his first feminine eye on his brow next to the second. The two eyes quickly realized that they were stronger together than apart, and from then on they worked together. Atum was so pleased with Thoth that he bestowed upon him a great honor and responsibility. Atum told Thoth, "You are to be the architect of all reality. My words, laws, and intentions will be delivered to you so that you may organize them and convert them into laws that all of reality will follow. By doing this, Thoth, you will be the champion of order and truth." Thoth accepted his promotion with grace and dignity. Now that Atum had both of his eyes, had created Shu and Tefnut, and had found an architect in Thoth, there was only one final thing to fix before physical reality could be thrust into creation. Geb and Nut had to be separated from each other, otherwise the children that they produced would forever remain stuck inside Nut's womb. Atum ordered Shu to lift up Nut and separate her from her lover and brother, Geb. Nut resisted, but Shu overpowered her and lifted her above Geb anyway. After Nut, the sky was removed from Geb. Matter started to fill the waters of Nun. Planets started to form into being, and the first primordial mass that extended from Geb would be called the Earth. Within the Earth there would be a central point of beginning that would be called Egypt. Within this land of Egypt, all the children of Atum would finally have a place to perform their great work. Geb was the earth, and hanging above him was the sky of Nut. Between them was Shu, the air. Tefnut, the moisture, intermingled with all three of them and helped to establish the atmosphere of the planet Earth. After so much waiting and struggling, Atum's plan of creation was starting to take massive strides of progress. After Geb and Nut were separated, the children inside Nut's womb were finally allowed to step into the world of creation. All at once, Isis, Nephthys, Osiris, and Set were born. Atum was very satisfied with 3 of these new forces which were his grandchildren. Yet Set reminded him of Apep, and because of this he was very weary. Even so, all the pieces were now in place for Atum to begin the culmination of his struggles. With an earth established and an atmosphere to support it, along with a pantheon of gods to govern it, the land of Egypt was almost ready to receive the gift that would be known as life. Thoth will govern the laws and truth. Shu is the heir. I, Atum, will now come down and join you in the land of Egypt. Then Atum made another being that was an exact, yet more condensed, version of himself. This new being was named Amun-Ra, and he was the direct son of Atum, the son of God. This new form of Atum, Amun-Ra, then created the shining sun that would hang over the sky of Nut. The first phase of manifestation had been completed. The land of Egypt now had a sun which would make it suitable for life. Yet the sun was so important that Amun-Ra had chosen to govern that celestial sphere by himself, instead of placing it in the hands of one of his children. Being the direct son of Atum, and being in control of the sun, Amun-Ra selected himself as the king of the gods. Amun-Ra told Isis and Nephthys that they were to act together as a second and darker light than the sun. This reflection of sunlight was also called the moon. Since life was about to begin, both Isis and Nephthys were also to help manage the process of death that was to follow the activity of life. They were also both given other powers and responsibilities as well, including fertility and watching over the crops that life would need to sustain itself. Osiris was also charged with governing fertility, but was given another very important task. Amun-Ra told Osiris that he would soon create mankind, and Osiris was to be the leader of this new species. Then Amun-Ra spoke to Set. Set was like Apep, an extrapolation of chaos. Atum knew that there was nothing he could do to eradicate chaos permanently, so he told Set to be careful and not let his fiery nature carry him too far astray. Set was given control over the storms and force of destruction, as that was his true nature. Amun-Ra then created more children. He gave birth to Ma'at, who would act as the living embodiment of order. As long as Ma'at lived, so would order. She was to represent all that was good and true, and because of this, she was joined together with Thoth in marriage. Then Amun-Ra created a being with two aspects, named Sekhmet or Hathor, who could either spread infinite love or hatred, depending on what she saw fit. He then created Anubis, who would also play a pivotal role in governing the dead along with Isis and Nephthys. With his pantheon established, Amun-Ra then created all of the plants and animals. Then he was finally ready to create mankind. He was so stirred by the emotions of having created a pantheon of gods that tears began to fall from his eyes, and these tears took form as the first men and women of Egypt. Amun-Ra's final act before taking the helm of the sun was to give each of the gods and goddesses a form to represent them. All of the gods were given bodies like mortal men and women, but some were given the heads of animals. Thoth was given the head of an ibis. Hathor could take on the head of either a cow or lion. Anubis was given the head of a jackal. Ma'at could take either the form of a woman or a feather. Set was given a composite form that was comprised of a dog, snake, fox. This form was fitting for Set since he was a manifestation of chaos which had no standard form. For himself, Amun-Ra selected the head of a hawk, but he could also change into any shape he wanted whenever he desired. No matter what form Amun-Ra would don, there would always be a beacon of light shining above the crown of his skull. Amun-Ra then boarded a ship that could carry the sun through two 12-stage cycles, which he dubbed as the Hours, and there were 24 of them in total. He then left his children to govern the new species of mankind, with Osiris as their leader.